Hello everyone, Bertina Amy here, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I thought I would do a new Dollar Tree DIY mermaid wreath. Okay, so I have two of these mermaid wreath forms, and I want to try the new ribbon wrapping method, and with different ribbon as well. So I have this purple ribbon from Temu that I'm going to use, and I just want to go ahead and start on ribbon wrapping the very first parallel bars all the way to the left of the layout of this mermaid wreath. However, if you stay tuned to the end, you'll notice I undo it because I need it to be able to wrap around both the wreath forms when I layer one over top the other. So go ahead and skip this step. I also go ahead and ribbon wrap the other panels off camera. However, I'm going to show you in the next one how I actually go ahead and ribbon wrap these in general. So Dollar Tree brought in these new blue linen ribbons that I of course had to pick up some, and I really like the shade of these, although they also have regular blue burlap ribbon as well that you can use instead. It looks like this blue linen ribbon is actually part of their upcoming 4th of July stash, but in either case, either of the blue burlap or blue linen ribbon, it's up to you which one you want to use, but either one will work fine here. So what I do is I go ahead and take the ribbon completely off the spool and fold it in half both ways. And as you can see, I'm ribbon wrapping around the top part of the bar, but using the second set of panels instead of the very first two all the way to the right. This is so that when it layers one over top the other, that way everything is covered with no gaps. However, this blue linen ribbon is rather narrow and is causing major gaps. So I play around with how many times I want ribbon wrapped around the upper bar before I start ribbon wrapping officially until I settle on one. And it's up to you. You could do 2 or 3 times. This is pretty narrow. The pattern I'm using for this one today in ribbon wrapping is I'm crossing right over left, with the one going to the left going under the bar on the left, around and over, and then the ribbon going to the right going over the bar on the right, around and under, crossing over again, right over left, and repeating that pattern until I get to the bottom bar. And I feel like this is a cool method because it kind of gives me the sort of fish scale vibes. And it's also fun because it kind of reminds me a lot of braiding. So it really doesn't require a whole lot of tools. So once we get to the bottom and we're happy with the overall wrapping of this section, I like to make sure there's virtually like no gaps towards the bottom. And once I'm satisfied, I go ahead and leave an excess of at least about an inch on either side and trim that off. That way I can repurpose the remaining parts of the ribbon. I could glue them together and repeat the pattern of ribbon wrapping on another set of panels. And stay till the end to see why I'm not hot gluing them to the back of this wreath form as of yet. So here I did the second panel off camera, but I go ahead and trim off the excess ribbon, leaving about an inch of each piece. And you can see I have all this excess ribbon. I go ahead and hot glue 2 together so that I could ribbon wrap the last section of this particular wreath form. I also turn it because the next panel, I want to actually ribbon wrap it in a different direction. And as I apply it, I notice that it's automatically wanting to create a gap. And I actually resolved this differently in the previous DIY mermaid wreath, but in this case, I decided to keep going because this, again, this one is more narrow than what I'm used to, this particular ribbon. So I keep going anyways because I figure I can always go back and cover that gap anyway. And before covering that gap, I get to the ends and then I trim off about an inch of excess, hot gluing it to the back because I don't need it to cover over to the next layer, if that makes any sense. And with that excess, I go ahead and hot glue those together and then try to cover it up and repeat the pattern so that it actually looks uniform. I hope that makes sense. With any excess, of course, hot gluing to the back just so that it looks cohesive. Next, I go ahead and bring back the other wreath form and try to decide if I want the purple layer over top the blue or the other way around. And in the end, it actually made more sense to have the blue over top the purple just because of the fact that that section I just finished ribbon wrapping would need those black wires covered, and it just didn't make sense to have the purple on top. It actually made more sense to instead remove the first panels that I did ribbon wrap on the purple one, and that's where I said you could just skip that part because otherwise you're going to see that bar showing up from the blue section. It just doesn't make sense. So I undo it and redo it to make sure it incorporates both the bars once they're layered one over top the other. I hope that's making sense. I also go ahead and all the excess that I didn't glue to the back of the wreath form, I go ahead and make sure that those get lifted and pulled over any existing bars so that we could cover those up. Any parts that still have bars showing, what I do to resolve that is I take scrap material and I just go ahead and ribbon wrap around it and then hot glue it to the back of the entire form. I hope that makes sense. So I basically turn two wreath forms into one major wreath altogether. Okay, so I originally went ahead and tied on some twine along the outer rim of this tail fin, but decided against it. So from a previous marketplace find, I actually collected a bunch of these scrap fabrics, and I thought that these two would go really well for this mermaid wreath. So I decided to cut up my own strips of this material so that I could use it for ribbon wrapping purposes. And obviously this won't have quite the same effect because even folding it won't really do much of anything. I decided to make it loose, not worrying about whether or not it was folded, and the fact that it doesn't have the wire built in like the other ribbons I've used for ribbon wrapping, but to ribbon wrap it anyways, if that makes sense. So I go ahead and do that and try to do that within the contexts of each of the parallel bars that I use. But basically this is a great way to use up some scrap fabric that you might have lying around, and I thought these colors would be perfect for this. But basically what I did was I took the strips and hot glued them to the back end of the wreath form, and then I went ahead and wrapped them around the two bars I selected for each. And since it's a layered project of one over top the other, I wanted to be able to have access to the other wires that I would need to be able to finish the product so that it looks like each section has its own wrapped section. So that's why I actually needed to remove the twine after all. I initially was trying to wrap the twine around it was because it was just what I did in the previous project, and it turns out I really didn't need to do that because I wasn't going to apply the exact same method. It was just to use to be grabbed to help grab onto the material that was going to be glued to the back behind it, and I decided to go a different route entirely with this because I have this scrap fabric. So here you can see how the twine was actually removed, and just a heads up, this is only the second time I'm doing this wreath form and doing it in a different way, specifically on the fin area. But by removing the twine, I go ahead and apply my original ribbon wrapping method, which is just you take your strands and you go over around the bars on either side, and then over, around, and under, crossing over in the middle, right over left, and repeat the pattern until you get to the end. And that's why I needed the excess bars to be exposed so that I can cover everything without any issue. I hope that's making sense. Feel free to watch this at a slower pace so that you could see the exact movements that I do for ribbon wrapping these. But I will say that due to time, I wasn't able to correct what my mistake is on this one. If I wanted to be able to ribbon wrap the middle section that you see open at this point, what I would have done is made sure to redo the teal colored ribbons that I made, because that way I would have been able to expose two more bars to be able to ribbon wrap. I didn't have time to be able to redo this, so with the crunch time and everything I'm doing in my own life outside of this, being full-time employed and working overtime, this is all I could make time to do. It is a little bit time consuming. I do put speed on this, so just note that if you're going to remake this in any fashion similar to this, the way I did this fin, I would recommend that you make sure you leave a spare bit of bars for the middle section, but it turns out fine in the end the way I go about finishing the middle section anyways. And with the excess fabric towards the end of these fins, I actually go ahead and tie them on so they don't come apart. So here I just took some more scrap purple fabric that I tore up and I just glued it to the back end, and I just made sure that they were attached towards the back so that way they wouldn't be flimsy moving around. And then I tied some additional purple fabric towards the bottom bars so that they weren't exposed. This way it has more of a background effect rather than a ribbon wrap effect like the others. Then I go ahead and also take this ribbon that I got from Temu, and it has these beautiful shades that match this specific wreath. And they really gave me the mermaid water-like vibes, and I thought they'd be perfect for the fin area. So I eyeball measured them out by folding them in half first to get an idea of how long I want the actual pieces to be. Cut them down to size, and then I repeated that step 3 times, gluing them on the fold area up towards the middle section, just above where the fin kind of meets the rest of the body, as you can see. And then I took this sort of fuchsia purple type flower that I got from Dollar Tree. And I just hot glued that over top to actually hide the fact that that's where the ribbons are glued behind. I hope that makes sense. Then I also cut out the plastic that was sticking out in the middle so that I could actually hot glue this flat piece of pearl in the middle to make it stand out. So to tie on the original fabrics that I cut down to strips, I actually just cut them down to size as folded first with a little bit extra. And then I stick the folded section through the section between where I could actually poke through between the bar and the wrapped ribbon, and then make a loop and then pull the tails through the loop and then repeat that in between each section in between. I hope that's making sense. Then I decided to go ahead and make this sort of fringe belt, tying in from the fabric I used in the previous Mermaid DIY wreath that I just cut up strips, or tore strips, I should say, and then tied them on in between the fabric or the wrapped ribbon sections. I hope that makes sense. Then I brought in more of the teal fabric that I used for the fin and cut them down to size in a similar fashion to the sort of swirly, more transparent ribbon that lays over top, but then I fold it and then glue it to the back end of the wreath so that way it could just kind of lay over top in between the pieces that I tied on. I hope that's making sense. Then off camera, I went ahead and tied on this twine at the back and then cut off the excess so that I could have a hanger for the back end of this wreath. And here's the final result. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you know that I am currently selling personally designed t-shirts based off of my upcoming book, The Cancer Dragon? Here, I'm unboxing some orders from coworkers who I'm very grateful to for supporting my mission. If you were to ask me honestly, the idea for this logo came from my DIY Cancer Dragon wreath. My husband bought me a shirt once that said, "I kicked cancer's ass," but because of where I work, HR would have had a hissy fit over that, so I decided to design my own. To me, there's something to be proud of in becoming a Cancer Dragon Slayer, and I really hope my journey inspires you. I never planned on designing shirts for this, but as I kept creating and finding ways to express my life story, it just happened. I thought to myself, who else might love a shirt like this? On the back, the sayings are made for slayers, warriors, supporters, and even for honoring lost warriors. These shirts were created with all of you in mind, and I was so happy with the design that I wanted to make it available for anyone who feels connected to this journey. Okay, so here's the cover so far for my upcoming book. The basic gist of it is, I became diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, got pregnant during fertility treatments, refused to abort despite my doctor's warnings that I'd die at birthing my child. For book updates or to support me, scan the code or click the link below. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.